Hi, I'm Robbin Miller, host of Miller Chat. My guest today is Torii Bottomley. She is an advocate, educator, artist.
Yes.
And Deb Falzoi, who is the co-coordinator of the Massachusetts Workplace Bill. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for having us, Robbin.
On the coldest day of the year.
Yes.
Well, we're here to talk a little bit in depth about workplace bullying. So why don't we just begin? What is workplace bullying?
So workplace bullying is the repeated harmful mistreatment, malicious mistreatment of a worker, coworker, or subordinate. It actually usually is the boss mistreating their subordinate, and it can cause all sorts of health problems, clinical depression, anxiety, and a whole spectrum of issues from anxiety to symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. So some common types of bullying would be like false accusations, sabotage, just like deliberate mistreatment of an employee.
Oh.
Yes, and it's sometimes involves even coworkers. And in this economic climate, people are, sadly, those who have mortgages and are sending kids to college, they may have like a moral dilemma, but they will side with the bully boss. And they say that bullying affects everyone. The person who engages in the bullying, they're affected. The bullies, the target's family is affected, their community. So that's what we need to be thinking about. And that's why it's called the Healthy Workplace Bill, because it asks for a healthy work environment in terms of your mind and your body. And we were talking about how some people say, the title is the Healthy Workplace Bill, but yet it's about anti-bullying. But actually, the title is positive, which will garner more support. And I think that in the future, as the bill passes, because this is a movement, we're seeing it now. It's been introduced in Rhode Island, and it's introduced in New York as well. And therefore, the title will lend itself to greater areas to protect the worker.
It sounds like common sense, right? Of having a healthy workplace, but bullying's probably been going on for a long time.
Well, when we testified last July, I remember Senator Nunn at the conclusion, because there were a lot of educators and a lot of nurses, because those are the top two bullied subgroups. And his concluding remark was, it's sad and it's obvious that we've gotten to a point where we have to have legislation to assure a compassionate workplace, compassionate behavior between people. So it should make sense, but obviously
It doesn't. And it's not new. It's been going on, who knows, hundreds of years in different ways.
Yeah, just like sexual harassment didn't really, or the culture didn't change until the law was introduced. It's the same with workplace bullying, and people will, given power, they'll abuse it, or some people will, and then they need the accountability through law in order to change their behavior or be told what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Yes.
And that's what I often refer to, because, decades before us, people suffered and fought for sexual harassment legislation, which I've had to use twice in my career as a teacher. And to have the language backed by the legislation and then be able to just refocus on your job, that's so empowering to the individual. And today, what's happening in terms of workplace bullying is that the places that you would go to, like HR or equity office or your union, they're not supporting you. So that's why when I heard about this bill, I said, I have to really get active in this to hand down to the next generation
Oh, yes.
what the people handed down to me. And also to take away the middle person who could be bought out, often is, and just, address the bully face to face, because we can.
I think we should.
Yep.
And they're protected and enabled by their employer. It's amazing how many bad bosses stay. I mean, you read the articles, it's like, why do they keep bad people? What is it about them?
I don't know. Sometimes I think they're like familial or political appointees, and often, and we talked about this, and David wrote about it. It's this high-low. David used high-low combo. I think that's a pretty good phrase. That the dynamic is a boss that has maybe not such good ethic and is not really prepared. And then you have the employee who is ethical and skilled. And that kind of goes into the ageism, because obviously the longer you've done a job, the better you know it.
That's right.
And you're seen as knowing too much. And so the boss can bully you, and then the people above them will turn a blind eye, because not only do you know too much, you cost too much.
Yeah, you basically become a threat to them. The other thing is that the people at the top create the culture of their organization, and when they don't, they're not against bullying, and in fact, sometimes they'll support it, because a lot of times subtle abuse will be a tool to get rid of any type of person they want to perform a certain way.
Right.
So basically, that once that culture is created where the bullying is tolerated, then it basically gives managers all the power to abuse as much as they want.
Yeah, you would think they would, we teach our kids, or we have family who know our children, we teach them to be fair and kind. My son's learning kindness in first grade. So here we are teaching them all these good skills. So what's going to happen when they go in the workplace? They're not going to be kind all the time, or they're not going to share.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I taught ESL to overaged immigrants, and I would stand up in front of the class and I would say, invest in your education. Your education is the key to your future. The kids from these countries would basically have all their belongings in a backpack. Everything physically that they owned had been ruined. And I said, don't worry, just invest, keep investing in your education, as I did. But yet, I was the person in the school that was the highest qualified, had the most certifications. One year I was the only person from the district representing the district in statewide conference. So I said, I can no longer stand in front of my students and say that, because what happened to me in front of them was evidence of it's not what you know, but who you know. And I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to believe in that.
Or the better you are, the more it hurts you.
Exactly.
Eventually.
Yeah. Or the more you can hurt someone else to get ahead.
And that's why a lot of targets suffer mental injury, because bullying is an illogical situation. And as people, we're educated to use logic. What happened? How did this happen? How can I prevent that from happening? But I always say to targets that are, in the fire right now, protect your brain. Don't try to be logical, because the usual response is to say, what did I do? I'm going to work better. But as you say, Deb, if you come in earlier or you work harder, that's what's going to make it worse.
Right.
So a lot of times the mental injury comes because it doesn't make sense what's happening to you. And in fact, that's sort of the litmus test. If you tell your story to someone and they say, no, I can't believe it. Right?
That's right.
And so, and that's another thing that, we really want to be speaking to those who are, suffering now, and give you these skills to, just document everything, communicate through email, find a person who has been bullied or a therapist that specializes in that to share your story. Because it's not their fault, but the average person will say, like I've mentioned, are you sure you didn't do something, ... So, just know ahead of the game that there are safe places to get support, and not set yourself up for, more injury. Yeah.
So basically, you got involved in the movement because you experienced it.
Yes.
And so did I. And would you say most of the people involved have experienced it in the movement here? I don't know about the other states.
I would say most, if not all, people have. Yeah.
Because how else can people understand where you're coming from?
Right.
Well, I believe that everyone I've come across in the movement has a story. And like Deb says, there's a spectrum.
Yes,
right?
yes, definitely.
And that has to do with also the diagnosis and the treatment that you would get. But what was so interesting was I live in Cambridge, and sometimes we have flyering days and just kind of go around. Well, when I flyered on the Lesley campus or the Harvard campus, it was the 20-year-olds, or I guess that's how old you are now in college. So the 20-year-olds, I was stunned. They would say, yeah, I know about that. That happened to my mother, or that happened to my father. So
Yes, that's interesting. Yeah, because it's more talked about.
yes.
And I think, aren't they from the school bullying culture? Because it's a couple of years old now, isn't it? What they did in Massachusetts?
Oh, that's interesting.
Because
that's
that's
interesting.
5 years old or whatever it is. Because every year they have the school bullying, anti-bullying that I'm going to in one of the schools here. The school has it. I think that's only a few years old. So these people are in college now. If they went to public school, private school can do whatever they want. But I think they're familiar with it.
Well, even if they went to private, it was in the media.
In the media, hopefully they paid attention.
And workplace bullying in general is just becoming more and more in the media. I don't know if it's a household term yet, but it's definitely it's definitely getting there. It's increasingly in the media on a daily basis, really.
How long have you guys been trying to change this? When did you start?
I started around 2010, a little bit earlier than that. My bullying experience was in 2007, so it dates that far back. And when I, researched what was happening, I really had no idea what was even happening to me. And eventually, I found some information that connected me to David Yamada, who's the professor at Suffolk Law who authored the legislation. And then from there, it sort of snowballed into getting a backing. The bill had actually already been introduced.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
But in 2010, we had like a group behind it to back the bill.
And what's the bill number now?
It's 1771.
Okay, and I believe there's something, and it would be good for the viewers to know, something in there about mobbing, anti-mobbing, trying to outlaw mobbing, or maybe tell people what mobbing is.
Well, when you present your case of bullying, there's different strategies, different techniques that the bully takes. And one is mobbing, and it's sort of what we talked about before, when they enlist peers or co-workers to set up these situations. Another technique is gaslighting, and I'll give you an example. there would be a meeting, and I would go home. I wouldn't know of the meeting, and then the colleagues would say, "Oh, it was announced in the last meeting." So gaslighting, you sort of think, "Geez, I don't remember. Am I losing my mind?" So it's a setup, and there's isolation, just many things, and in my case, I was bullied for over 6 years, and every year was a different strategy. But people, especially educators of all levels, stay in it for the children. But I want to go back to what Deb said about bullying and it's getting out there. I was just in Albany with the New York City crew, also educators, and it was a wonderful day. It was Monday. It was their day off of school, and they all drove up, and we spoke to different legislators, and it was a wonderful opportunity for me because I would say that within our community, we know, but because we went through the same process. Like, I didn't know what was happening. It was happening to a colleague at the same time. She ordered books from Amazon, and we read, and had phone conversations. And we said, oh, this is what's happening. A lot of people did their own research to find it. But what happened in New York, which I find, again, outside of our group, is that people are still struggling with the term bully. There's some that just say, oh yeah, that's in the playground. And then there's some that know it's, cyberbullying and whatnot. But very few attach it to adults.
Right.
And then even less the workplace.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of public edification that has to go on. And even a legislator said, oh, well, my son was it alleged that he was bullying someone because, pushed someone, and I don't have an issue with that, or truth or dare game, and the dare was seen as bullying. And as I was mentioning to Deb, if someone in your family or a child was accused of bullying, you may have a proclivity to, stonewall even entertaining the thought of this legislation. But this is not the boss had a bad day and yelled at you.
Oh, no.
This is a planned strategy which consumes the boss's time instead of running the business.
Yeah, that's right.
It's sort of like a sadist personality, because they actually enjoy this planning and, having planning meetings with peers. And at the same time, it takes up the time of the employee who has to be documenting whatever.
Yes, that's what I found that. I found that it was annoying, even though I was part-time. It was annoying. I was spending more time documenting, doing my job. It's outrageous. But, it's amazing how people enjoy it.
That's why I say that's not,
Where
for me,
was it?
sadist is the term, And in New York, they brought up the term conspiracy. And I was sort of, throwing that around in my mind, like, well, there's mobbing, and, well, there's mobbing, and that will mean more on the same level, your peers. But conspiracy would be the principal, the assistant superintendent, and the superintendent. It was their agenda. So the more that we hear of other people's stories, the more we continue to learn about this issue, and it's everywhere.
And the bill, can you just, the bill number is H1771, and it makes people accountable, and it's inclusive, right?
Yeah, right. So right now, if you're in a protected class, you feel like you're being discriminated against because of your gender or your race or disability, you're protected under law.
Right.
But even then, you have to prove that you're being discriminated against because of that protected class. Whereas this legislation would pretty much cover all of the gaps in the law.
Right.
And it would say, you know, you'd have to prove that the behavior was intended, and you'd have to prove that it was happening. So there's a high threshold for proving that this happened to you, just like sexual harassment law. But it actually gives people protections. Just to what Torii was saying, a lot of these stories come out, you know, we'll put things online about things that happen, and or just even telling somebody your story, they'll find it kind of outrageous what happened, and they'll assume that there are protections already, and it's not until someone goes through a workplace bullying experience that they find, okay, nothing's there to protect me legally unless I can prove that I was being treated this way because of my protected class. And a lot of situations don't fall into that category.
No.
And there are, like, you know, sometimes we get the question, well, aren't there whistleblower or retaliation laws? There are, but they're not enforced.
No.
And I know in New York, they, Francesco Portelis, who's sort of spearheading the New York City teachers and running for UFT president, he did research. There were so many cases of retaliation brought up, and not one was there found grounds or evidence. So, and that's why we say, we know that, we want to take out the middle person. We can prove it. We have the evidence.
You're right.
Yeah.
Well, in the time we have less than 7 minutes. Let's talk about some of the advocacy you guys are doing.
Do you want to go ahead and talk about?
Okay. Well, let's see. One is we mentioned flyering, and there is, I don't know what camera we're on, but there's a lot of information that you can download on the Massachusetts Healthy Workplace Bill site.
So it's mahealthyworkplace.com.
And as I said, you can download, there are flyers, there are information sheets, there's data, and for your own edification and to educate others, you can just be kind of radical and download them and put them in the, you know, the lunchroom. So that's one thing. Another is I'm doing a public art project, and it's called the Massachusetts Face Workplace Bullying, and it's through Inside Out. And basically, its mission is to heal and educate, because a lot of targets, it's very painful for them to want to have their face out there. So it's a picture of their face, and also to write the story. And I've had people say, I'm not ready to write my story. I don't know if I want my name on it. And I say, I'm here, and just know that when you are at that stage, you're going to be free. So that's another thing that we're doing. We're radio shows as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, a lot of it is that when people are going through this, they feel isolated and they really have no idea what they're going through. So a lot of what we're doing is just simply educating people as to what workplace bullying is. So in 2007, when I had my experience, there was very little information online about what this was. It was really a lot of digging. But now, almost 10 years later, we've got this website. There's the Workplace Bullying Institute website. All sorts of information about, what someone could be experiencing, why people bully, what the health effects are, ways to deal with it. So that's sort of the first goal. And then the second goal is to get those people to contact their legislators, their state legislators, because this is on the state level, and encourage them to make this bill a priority.
Yeah, because right now it's in the third reading.
Mm-hmm.
Now, explain maybe a little bit, just briefly, what that means for people who may not know what that means.
So the process for a bill becoming law in Massachusetts is that it first has to go in front of a committee that, there are different topics basically for each committee. And then once it passes that committee, it goes into the House, and there are different levels in the House. We're right now in the third reading at the House, which is this huge step that if we pass that, it will go on to the Senate. It could, bounce around based on
Language.
yeah,
amendments.
right. And then ultimately it would be signed into law. So we're at this really critical time right now with the bill. Each legislative session is 2 years, so if we don't pass it this session, we're in the second year right now, then we have to pretty much start over in January. It's kind of the first step, but the thing is that since we've introduced it, this is our third full session now. We've gotten, I think it was about 13 co-sponsors in our first session, and then last session it was around 38. This session it's around almost 60 co-sponsors. So, we're really getting support in the State House. It's growing, and there's been a lot of buzz. It's just a matter of encouraging them to make this a priority, because there's thousands of bills that go through the State House, and they can only address so many.
So much.
And it would be so amazing if Massachusetts was the first. And as we said, New York is snowballing, and Rhode Island just got the bill introduced. So it would be with great pride that Massachusetts, a state with a history of legislative first, if it would take that bold step.
You're right. So with 2 minutes to go, what would be the bullet points now to encourage people to get more involved, what they can do, who do they call?
I think the first step would be to visit the website, which is mahealthyworkplace.com, and see what ways people can get involved. I mean, there's a whole like a wealth of information on there about ways to get involved, but someone might have some sort of skill they can bring to the table that we've never thought about. I mean, this is really a grassroots movement. There are about actually 20-something states across the nation who've introduced this legislation, but Massachusetts and New York are kind of at the forefront of passing it, and no state has passed it. So we really want people to get involved in any way we can, and just keep building our contact list, so we can let people know at different stages of the process when to contact their legislators, and so we can get this bill passed.
And the power of story, like the Inside Out project with the photos, right?
Right, and that's on the site. But what I would like to say is, to those of you who are suffering now, please go to your doctors. Don't belittle your suffering. And, like we mentioned, it's the physical and mental injuries can run wide and deep. It's really important. And even though there are not a lot of therapists that specialize in PTSD, there are therapists who are willing to learn the techniques, but please go and see your doctor.
Well, we have to wrap up now. Thank you very much for coming on. We've covered a
you,
lot.
Robbin,
for having us.
I'm Robbin Miller, host of Miller Chat. My guest today was Deb Falzoi, co-coordinator of the Workplace Bullying, Massachusetts Workplace, and Torii, educator, artist, and advocate. Thank you very much. Good night.